80 days. That's how long federal investigators have been dismantling a single man's alibi. Not because they're lost. Not because the case went cold. But because every time they think they found the edge of Tommaso Cion's story, the data pulls them back to the beginning. And the beginning is always the same moment. 9:50 p.m. January 31st. A garage door closes. A light goes off. And a woman who arranged her own rides, trusted her own circle, and never missed a Sunday church stream, simply vanishes. No forced entry. No screaming. No trace. Just silence. And silence, in this case, is not the absence of something. It is the evidence itself. That Sunday night felt exactly like every other Sunday in the Guthrie home. The mahjong tiles were neatly stored away. The church livestream was already queued up for morning. Every surface, every routine, every detail reflected a woman in complete control of her environment. Nancy Ellen Long Guthrie was not careless. She was not impulsive. She was a woman who valued structure, who trusted only the people she had personally let inside her life. And at 9:50 p.m., one of those people watched her walk through her garage door for the last time. Tommaso Cion. Her son-in-law. AP biology teacher. A man defined by structure, precision, and control. He left shortly after, or so he said. His timeline sounded clean. Almost rehearsed. Like a man who had already decided what the story would be before anyone thought to ask. But here's what no one prepared for. The data didn't get the memo. The footage from that night holds more than timestamps. At 1:47 a.m., a figure appears on the Guthrie property. And what happens in the next several seconds is what separated this case from every ordinary missing person report filed that week. The individual does not hesitate. There is no scanning. No second guessing. No pausing to check surroundings. The movement is direct, efficient, almost mechanical. Every step placed with intention. To waste nothing, not time, not energy, not exposure. But the detail investigators keep returning to is not the movement itself. It's what happened just before. The suspect used nearby foliage to partially obscure a camera before making their approach. Think about what that requires. You don't obscure a camera on a property you've never visited. You don't know which angle to approach from unless you've studied it. You don't move with that level of comfort in darkness on unfamiliar ground. This was not someone who stumbled onto the Guthrie property at 1:47 a.m. This was someone who had already been there in their mind, in their memory, possibly in person, long before that night. And then the camera cuts. 1:47 a.m. Gone. What fills that silence is the question that has driven this investigation for 80 days. On February 2nd, at exactly 4:15 p.m., federal agents executed a high-priority warrant. They weren't looking for fingerprints. They weren't looking for fibers. They came for something far more precise, the digital memory locked inside Tommaso Cion's Honda CR-V. Infotainment systems. Telematics logs. Door event timestamps. Seat sensor data. Every modern vehicle is quietly building a record of everywhere it goes and everything it carries. And this one had been building a record all night. The first anomaly, 4.8 miles. Not random mileage. Not a rounding error. A precise, measurable distance logged on a vehicle that, according to Tommaso's statement, never moved that night. 4.8 miles is a perfect round trip to an unknown location. The second anomaly, a door-opening event recorded at 2:18 a.m. Tommaso told investigators he was miles away. Asleep. Nowhere near that vehicle. The car disagreed. And then there's the third layer, the one that shifts everything. The GPS system on that vehicle was manually disabled. Not a malfunction. Not a dead battery. A deliberate, targeted action that required specific knowledge of that vehicle's interface. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing tried to make the car forget. It didn't forget enough. Because a drivetrain doesn't speculate. It doesn't protect anyone. It doesn't choose sides. It records. And what it recorded that night directly contradicts the first statement Tommaso Cion gave to investigators. So which version holds the truth, the alibi, or the machine? When investigators sat across from Tommaso Cion in that interrogation room, they weren't just listening to what he said. They were watching how he said it. His composure was noted immediately. Not as a sign of innocence, but as an anomaly. Officers on scene described his initial statements as unusually structured. Not the fragmented, disoriented account of a man processing shock, but something closer to a forensic reconstruction, organized, sequential, precise. He gave them a timeline. Not a memory. A timeline. And within that timeline was a detail that immediately flagged behavioral analysts. In the middle of describing his missing mother-in-law's final movements, Tommaso referenced biological baselines. Heart rate. Physical response patterns. An AP biology teacher's instinct? Perhaps. Or the language of someone who had already mentally processed the event before it was reported as a crime. Every detail in his account seemed engineered to narrow suspicion toward an unknown outsider. But the effect was the opposite. Because the more precise the account, the more questions it created. Because real grief is messy. Real shock is incoherent. Real loss does not arrive pre-organized. This did. And investigators noticed. While behavioral analysis was building its case in the interrogation room, physical evidence was building a parallel case on the ground. At 2:14 a.m., 4 minutes before that car door opened, Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker recorded something that stopped investigators cold. A sedation-like signature. Not a cardiac event. Not natural sleep. Something introduced. Something administered with enough precision to register as a controlled suppression of biological response. That raises a question no one has been able to answer. How does someone with no medical background, no clinical clearance, obtain and administer something that precise in the middle of the night without leaving a single trace of struggle? At that same 2:14 a.m. timestamp, the vehicle's seat sensor registered exactly 110 pounds. Nancy Guthrie's recorded weight from the front door to the car is less than 50 feet. No signs of struggle. No disruption to the surrounding environment. The neighbor's terrier, an animal known to react to the slightest sound from 40 yards away, remained completely silent. And at the back gate, investigators found one final detail. A single tactical glove. Not placed carefully. Not hidden. Abandoned. Dropped in what the position suggests was a rushed exit, the one moment where control slipped. Because everything else that night was too clean. Too quiet. Too deliberate. Except that glove. And that single imperfect moment may be the thread that unravels everything. To understand where this investigation leads, you have to go back 18 years. Tommaso Cion and Dominic Evans didn't just share a stage. They shared a rehearsal room, a 15 by 15 space where two people spent nearly 2 decades building routines, patterns, and a level of familiarity that extended far beyond music. Early Black never found fame. But what they built inside that rehearsal space may be more significant than any record deal. Shared pressure. Shared schedules. Shared access. According to sources close to the investigation, Evans had entry to Tommaso's gear bag. And inside that bag, a spare set of keys to the Honda CR-V. Not forced access. Not stolen. Given. The kind of access that only exists between people who have operated inside each other's lives for so long that boundaries blur into trust. Dominic Evans carries his own weight in this investigation. A past tied to burglary. A history that law enforcement has never fully connected on record, but has never fully dismissed either. And when investigators pulled rehearsal footage from early Black's early years, a detail emerged that shifted the analysis entirely. Evans moves the same way the figure in the 1:47 a.m. footage moves. Same controlled use of space. Same efficiency. Same absence of wasted motion. FBI physical profile analysis placed the figure in the doorbell footage at exactly 5 foot 9 inches. Dominic Evans stands at 5 foot 9 inches. Coincidence? Or convergence? The first theory investigators are working with is what analysts have quietly called the inside-out proxy. In this scenario, Tommaso Cion never physically carried out the abduction. He didn't need to. 18 years of shared routine had already done the work. Dominic Evans knew the property. He knew the schedule. He knew the vehicle. He had the keys. The distance between the Catalina Foothills home and their rehearsal space is just over 7 miles, a 14-minute drive. Evans could have moved in, used the family's own vehicle, transported Nancy, and returned the car before dawn. A scene left untouched. A narrative left intact. It's a theory that holds together until the pacemaker data enters the room. Because what was administered to Nancy Guthrie at 2:14 a.m. required medical knowledge, clinical precision, access to a substance that doesn't appear in the background of a drummer with a burglary record. That level of sophistication points somewhere else. And that somewhere else is exactly where Theory 2 begins. The second theory is darker. And in many ways, more logical. What if this was never a forced abduction? What if the scene was designed to look like one? The evidence supports a controlled, coordinated departure, an event staged to resemble a break-in while concealing something entirely different happening. Beneath the surface. No struggle. No noise. A dog that didn't bark. A home left in perfect order. A woman who went from her front door to a vehicle in under 50 feet without a single sign of resistance. That is not what a kidnapping looks like. That is what cooperation looks like. Or sedation so precise that resistance was never possible. And if this was coordinated, then the people who coordinated it understood Nancy's routines at a level that only proximity provides. Her schedule. Her trust. Her independence. The very qualities that made her feel safe were the qualities that made her vulnerable. But then comes the contradiction. The glove at the back gate. Abandoned. Rushed. Imperfect. A controlled operation does not leave evidence at the exit point. A staged scene does not crack at the final moment. But this one did. Which means something went wrong. And whatever went wrong, that is where the truth is hiding. On day 80, something happened that reframed the entire investigation. The ransom demand collapsed. $6 million reduced overnight to 0.5 Bitcoin. FBI forensic financial analysts interpreted this immediately. This is not the behavior of a professional operation. This is not a coordinated international network maintaining leverage. This is local pressure. This is someone watching their plan dissolve in real time and desperately trying to salvage anything from it. The drop in demand is not a negotiation tactic. It is a confession of desperation. A seasoned operator doesn't lower their number by 90%. A seasoned operator walks away or holds firm. Only someone who is losing control, someone who can feel the investigation closing in, makes that move. And when you layer that desperation onto everything else, the behavioral inconsistencies, the vehicle data, the disabled GPS, the pacemaker's signature, the picture that forms is not of a perfect crime. It is of a plan that began unraveling the moment it started. Nancy Ellen Long Guthrie was never just a data point. She was not the 110 pounds registered on a seat sensor. She was not the sedation signature on a pacemaker readout. She was not a timestamp on an odometer log. She was a woman who arranged her own rides. Who trusted the people inside her circle. Who lined up her church stream on Sunday nights and stored her mahjong tiles with care. And somewhere in the gap between 9:50 p.m. and 2:18 a.m., in 41 minutes that no official briefing has fully explained, the trust was used against her. Investigators are not circling Tommaso Cion because they are lost. They are circling because every path leads back to the same point. The same routines. The same connections. The same rehearsal room where 18 years of familiarity quietly built something no one saw coming. One question remains. If the car traveled 4.8 miles at 2:14 a.m., who was Nancy Guthrie facing when that door opened? The FBI tip line is active. a reward remains available. If you were near the Catalina foothills on January 31st, or if you saw a Honda CR-V moving through the Rio Rico corridor in the early hours of February 1st, that detail, no matter how small, could be the one that completes this picture. Because the garage light went off at 9:50 p.m. It never came back on. And the silence that followed every second of it was a decision.